our 22 News Broadcast Center, this is 22 News in Focus.
Good Sunday afternoon and welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Laura Hutchinson. As the weather continues to get colder, there are families struggling to heat their homes. One problem is the cost of energy continues to rise. And today on 22 News in Focus, we'll talk about what's driving the costs and how much we'll have to pay in the new year. We'll also talk about ways to curb costs this winter. Joining us to start off the program, we have Michael Lynch, President of Strategic Energy and Economic Research Incorporated. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Always nice to have you come on and talk to us. So what have you found researching the world markets when it comes to oil and gas? Even electric. We're talking about all ways to heat our homes this winter. In some cases, the costs are going up. In some cases, the costs are going down. What are you seeing in your research right now?
Well, we just went through a decade of higher fossil fuel prices, which were driven mainly by political problems in the Middle East. But unfortunately, a lot of people convinced themselves that, no, this is a new day, the easy oil is gone, and so forth. And combined with the shale revolution, we're now seeing that decade-long period of high prices end. So you have this conflict between fossil fuels getting cheaper and renewable energy becoming more valuable because of concerns about the climate.
So we are seeing oil prices down right now. Actually, gas right now to fill up your car is fantastic. Do you see this changing at some point, or is this something that you think we're going to continue to see for a while?
I think we're going to continue to see it for a while. You know, people forget that for a long time, for most of the history of the oil industry, the price was about $30 a barrel. The $80 to $100 a barrel lasted only for a few years. And so we're getting back closer to normal levels. And we may even see prices pushing towards $2 within the next few years.
And when you talk about oil and natural gas, and as far as supply and demand is concerned, do either have a stronger future right now? I guess, even looking at Massachusetts, looking on a global standpoint, what are you thinking as far as the future of both?
Well, oil, generally the price is heavily influenced by what OPEC countries do. So even if the U.S. produces a lot more oil, it's still going to be at the world price. Natural gas, on the other hand, is very expensive to ship overseas. So if people find a lot of cheap gas, then the price in the U.S. will go down, which is what we've seen. So U.S. natural gas prices should stay low for a long time. Oil is more unpredictable because of all the political elements that drive the price.
Now, when the price comes down, do you see that as something that's actually bad for our economy? How do you view our economy right now, when we're talking about this?
Generally speaking, low energy prices, especially oil and gas, are bad for a few people and good for most of us. More money in the pockets of consumers, especially cheaper costs for transportation, for plastics, a lot of fertilizer, food. The oil industry, they will struggle now, but that's their business. It's their job to struggle through boom and bust cycles.
But it's not necessarily a sign that the economy is struggling right now.
No, not really. I mean, the weak economy globally has helped bring the price down this summer, but longer term, it's not really a factor.
Okay. And what about the closing of some of the coal-fired nuclear power plants that we have in our area here? We've been talking about some of the rate increases, and we are going to talk about throughout the program here and how this is impacting us in western Massachusetts. But what are you, thinking about when you see some of these closing down? We're talking about the Kinder Morgan pipeline, all of these changes happening.
Well, you have a problem where you've got a lot more renewable energy coming online. Gas nationally is very cheap. It's a problem in the winter in New England because you don't have enough pipeline capacity to meet the surge, and there's a lot more demand when it gets really cold. On the other hand, I hate to say it to the people in the Appalachians, but coal is a fuel of the past. It's got to be phased out. Perhaps it was done prematurely. That's a different call. But you got to expect that you're going to see something replace the coal. The Kinder Morgan pipeline, frankly, I favor it strongly. We have lots of natural gas pipelines in Massachusetts already, and they haven't destroyed the economy or the environment. And especially in the short term of 5, 10, 20 years, gas turbines are very clean compared to all other fossil fuels. So it makes a lot of sense to increase the usage, the availability of natural gas for power generation.
So the pipeline has your support.
Yes.
Are there any misconceptions out there right now? There are a lot of people who are against it just because of how this may personally impact either their property. But are you hearing any misnomers that you happen to believe are incorrect or anything just about these?
Well, generally speaking, there are people who will oppose anything. You know, there are solar projects, wind. You don't want somebody to dig up your front yard to put a gas pipeline through it. But generally speaking, after the pipelines are in, you really don't notice them. And it certainly makes sense to try to put the pipeline next to a highway, for example, instead of through I don't want to say pristine forest because it's been a long time since there were any pristine forests around here, but you don't want to put it through a nice landscape if you can avoid it.
And how do you think that this would impact, these pipelines would impact our energy costs, you know, in the future?
It should bring down the cost of electricity, especially. Also, gas prices for homeowners, the people who have it. So this year, the electricity prices are being pressured by the fact that to get peak gas supply, you have to take it out of storage, which means it's more expensive. It's like having batteries instead of a power line to your house.
Now, is this sort of a make or break situation here? Do you have any concerns if these pipeline projects don't move forward?
Not really. I mean, you won't even notice it 10 years from now. The cost may be a bit higher for homeowners, but you know, the system adjusted. The electric power system is very large, very robust, and it will adjust. I doubt if anybody's going to reopen a coal plant, for example, to offset the lack of the gas supply. But you can do other things, including bring in more hydro from Canada, and certainly wind power should be growing in this region.
And I know the federal government is actively promoting alternative energy sources. We do have someone from our state Senate here to talk to us about what our state is doing. But is this something that you see would be a great investment to have more, you know, solar projects in New England, large-scale wind projects, that sort of thing?
I personally believe we need more money now for research into especially solar to bring the costs down. The solar costs are still pretty high. They require a lot of subsidies. A lot of wind projects are competitive, not all by any means, and there's still a lot of subsidies there. So personally, I feel like it's buying photovoltaics, especially at this point, is 2 or 3 times the cost of conventional electricity. And you're kind of buying into a technology that will be phased out when the technology improves. So it's a little bit like people who wanted to build the Concorde and the supersonic transport, things like that, and they said, oh, we have to build it, it's the new thing. And 10 years later you find out, boy, it's a good idea, we didn't spend that money on that.
Hey, there you go. That's one of those things you have to do a lot of research on before you move forward with that. Now, as we get into 2015, can you believe it? It's 2015 already. But as we get into this, what are some world events right now that you think are impacting supply, demand, or costs? You know, world events are always impacting the oil markets, as you were mentioning. What do you see happening right now, or even coming up this year, that could impact, you know, that sort of thing?
There's very little that will affect the price of natural gas in the U.S. Globally, because there is so much supply available, and the cost, the price comes down some, you'll drill a little less and the price will go up, but it won't go high. World oil is a bigger problem because some countries, like Venezuela, are already in very bad shape economically, and with a low oil price, you have the possibility of civil unrest, labor action, and so forth, which could cut off the supply of oil. We're already seeing problems in Libya. So in the oil business, you always have the possibility of waking up to a major supply disruption and finding that the price is going to shoot up for that reason. But absent that, we should see prices remain about where they are now, around $50.
Well, that's pretty good, actually. As you were saying, a lot of consumers pretty happy right now. I know it's
Yes.
more money in our pockets. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. I really do appreciate it. Michael Lynch, Strategic Energy and Economic Research. Always appreciate you having
It's a
you
pleasure.
joining us on our program. Thank you so much. And after the break, we'll be talking with a representative of a major electric supplier to the Northeast. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today we're talking about energy costs and what we'll be paying in the new year. We just heard from an energy economist. Joining me now is Colleen Gardner, a community and customer manager from the National Grid. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yes, nice to have you. Well, in September, we heard that rates would possibly be going up for National Grid, and that's exactly what happened in November. The rates in turn went up. So we were just kind of talking with Michael Lynch about what plays into these prices and why this happened. So from National Grid standpoint, help us understand how you determine your rates and what the process is.
So National Grid is a transmission, electric, and gas distribution company. We do not supply our own generation anymore. We used to do generation, and back in the late 1998, 99, we divested from that. So we purchase our electricity. In doing so, we have to go to the market. Mm-hmm. So part of the regulations say you go out, and for us, we go out in September, and we procure our generation for November. So when we went out, the prices were higher. We are required to pick the lowest supplier, so we selected the lowest supplier. That's the part of the bill that our customers will see going up. The distribution part that National Grid has, which is the operation and maintenance, has not changed, and that remains the same. Mm-hmm. So from November through April, the customers will see a higher bill. Our other counterparts have also had to do that. They're on a slightly different schedule. So we go out in September, they went out in November for a January 1st implementation. So I think across the state, you're going to see it very similar where prices are up. We've worked very hard to try and mitigate that for our customers via energy efficiency, levelized billing, things along those lines. We strongly encourage our customers to take advantage of all energy efficiency programs. We want to look at Mass Save. We want to look at the programs that National Grid has. We have a lot of educational pieces to talk about lowering your thermostat, setback thermostats, seeing what you can do with, because your furnace is running, that uses a lot of electricity. Lighting, is there a chance you can change to LED lighting, different things along those lines. We've also talked with our customers about levelized billing, which means they pay the same price all winter to try and help them with that electric bill. Now,
when you were going in to see the rates, were you expecting to see the rate increase? Because we are hearing about how costs are down in many aspects, but of course we're having a rate increase. So is that something that you were expecting? What played into that?
So generally in the winter we do see higher supplier costs coming through, and as Michael talked about earlier, it's very difficult to get the gas up here. And at this point a lot of our generation is from gas. So we have very little compared to what we had in the past from coal and oil. We have much more from natural gas, and it's got to come up, and it's got to come somehow, and we just don't have that superhighway to bring it up here.
Mm-hmm. So how would some of these projects that we were talking about as well, is that something that would impact your supply and demand if some of these pipeline projects ultimately went through?
Those would be a great enhancement to the ways that we can get that generation up here to help our customers.
Okay, so the reason rates are going up, though, is because there's just not a lot of product.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And so that's really what those projects would single-handedly help out with, at least from that standpoint.
And when a customer were to look at their bill, what they would see is really 67% of their bill is that supplier cost.
Okay.
So the O&M piece, which is the part that National Grid has, is about 18% of their bill. So there's a great amount of the bill that does come from that.
Okay, and the proposal was that a typical electric bill was to go up about 37%. That's what the projection was in September. Is that ultimately what ended up happening in November?
That's correct. That was approved by the DPU at that proposed rate. And it's important to note that that is a direct pass-through. Mm-hmm. So National Grid does not make any money on that portion of the bill. That is what the supplier charges National Grid. That is what National Grid passes along on the bill to the customer.
Okay, 37% though, is that higher than normal when you look at past years?
It varies year to year, and it's very hard to predict. That's 37% over last winter. Things that are helping us this winter, I mean, right now it's very mild weather. We had a great November. We're predicting Christmas at 60 degrees, so that's always helpful. And anything we can do in the new year to bring that forward with that will help. And then again, anything the customers can do in terms of really conserving is quite helpful.
And are you offering any information on some of these other projects, or are you sort of distancing yourself from them? Are you a part of that and getting the information out about some of these other projects?
Certainly we can help the customer with the decisions they need to make when it comes to suppliers and what they're looking for, because as I said, we don't make anything on that part of the bill. We absolutely supply them and do the O&M work for them, so we are still their electric company. As far as the other projects that go along, you know, that's part of the government's role, is to make sure that they're involved in that. We are an arm's transaction away from those. We are involved in looking at other sources of energy supply, and we have an aggressive program going on with solar and other things. We're going to be bringing another 20 megawatts of solar on in Massachusetts in 2015, and there'll be some out in this area, there'll be some in Central Mass. Our area actually goes from Buffalo all the way to Gloucester, so we have quite a bit happening in Massachusetts.
Will that be making a big difference in the coming years, or when do you expect to see some of those changes?
Well, we'll continue to do that through the remaining years. By 2020, there's a project to try and really enhance the alternate energy, and we're very interested in diversifying our sources.
Now, I know that you cover a big part of the region. When you set your rates, is it specific to a region and the events happening there, or is it really across the board
So
set?
in Massachusetts, we set it across the board, so the rates are for Massachusetts.
But that wouldn't necessarily be the same for like New York or
New York
the
would
other
have
customers.
different rates, Rhode Island would have different rates, and you have to remember each one has different areas, so the costs of doing business there are different.
Okay, and I know that you have some kind of incentives for energy efficient home equipment and all of that. Do you see some of your customers taking advantage of that? What do you offer?
So we offer a variety of programs. It could be something as small as a thermostat. It could be something as big as lighting and motors and things in businesses. So we offer something from the residential customer all the way through to the commercial customer. We actually have opened in Worcester. What we have is a sustainability hub, and it's an exciting place. It's been open for about a year now. We bring tours through, we have groups there, and you can go in and look at some of our energy efficient equipment. You can go into the kitchen and experience, you know, the countertop that's made from recycled products, and you'll see the microwave and the stove. It's very exciting. You'll see the new washer and dryer. You can have the picture frame on your wall, which will actually talk about ways to save energy with what's going on in your house. I think the setback thermostats and the programmable thermostats are a fantastic thing. I could sit here right now and turn up or lower the heat in my house from my smartphone. So there's a lot of technology, and it depends what the consumer's really ready for. Are they ready for something very basic? Are they ready to step up? And it depends how aggressive they want to be.
And is that limited incentives? Is this something that you have to, you know, opt in for, and there's only a certain number of people who can do it, or how does that work?
But while the programs do in general throughout the year have a cap on them, we really have had a great response to them. We haven't had a lot of problems. It depends what it is you want to do, and you would have to meet certain thresholds to be able to get the incentive on that.
And what are some of the incentives, just to give an
It could
example?
be, as I said, lighting. It could be furnaces. It could be motors. We have soup to nuts.
Okay, very good. And I know that in our next segment, we're going to be talking about saving money and weatherization. You did mention earlier that you help out with some of that. How can people learn more about what's specific to National Grid?
So what they can do is, we often have it on our bill insert. We have a great website that has all kinds of information for them there. They can call our customer contact center at 1-800-322-3223. And depending whether they're a residential customer or a commercial customer, they will direct them to the appropriate programs.
Okay, and as people get into the new year and start paying more, you know, as they're turning up the heat and all of that, that's also a good way to get in touch with you if you have any questions about your bill as well, because people may have questions about this 37%
Absolutely. They will
increase.
walk them through the bill step by step, and then they will make some suggestions for programs they could participate in. And hopefully we can help every one of our customers get through the winter season.
Excellent. Colleen Gardner from National Grid, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. We hope you have a nice warm winter.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much. And next we'll have some tips on how to winterize your home and some programs that can help cut your costs. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Today we've been talking about the cost of energy and alternative energy technologies. We've also talked about why the cost of energy is increasing for some people this year. And now let's find out what you can do to save money if you find your costs have gone up. Joining me now, we have Marin Goldstein, Outreach and Education Manager at the Center for EcoTechnology. Thank you so much for being here.
Definitely very happy to be here.
So nice to have you. So tell me about EcoTechnology. Where are you located? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, we've been around for coming up on 40 years now, and we're originally based in the Berkshires out of Pittsfield, but we definitely have expanded over the years. So now we have our largest office actually in Northampton, and we have our Eco Building Bargains reuse store, largest big reuse store in New England, actually located down in Springfield.
Excellent. So what sort of services do you offer? We're talking about high heating bills. Some costs are going up this winter, you know, and some people may be interested in saving some money. So where do you start?
Yeah, well, so the CET works with everybody. We work with businesses, we work with small businesses, we work with large businesses, we work with residential people, people in their homes. And so the main thing we really do is try to help people implement and take action to have savings in their homes. Primarily, that's what we're talking about mostly on this show, it seems. So really helping people realize that there's a great program already in place in Massachusetts. We've got 3 years in a row, we're number one energy efficiency in the country, and the Mass Save program is a really great place for people to start. Most people don't realize that over 50% of their energy costs in their home goes towards heating, cooling, and hot water. And so if you deal with the structure of your home, if you deal with the airflow and the draftiness, you deal with the insulation, those are the two most important things you can deal with in your home that will affect cost savings or loss of money just because that heat is going up straight out of your roof.
And now a lot of people pay for Mass Save but don't take advantage of it. So talk to me about Mass Save and how that works.
Yeah, so Mass Save is directly on our bill. We're already paying for it through our utility bills. And the program basically is set up that you have a home energy assessor come into your house. They're there for about 2 to 3 hours, and they really look from top to bottom. They're looking at what kind of insulation is already in your roof, down in your walls. They're also looking at draftiness of where airflow might be happening, that you're going to lose a lot of heat through that. They're also checking your combustion systems, your furnace, your boilers, your hot water, making sure that that's safe too. There's sometimes people don't even realize when they're having a carbon monoxide issue in their home, and that happens as a part of the assessment as well, making sure it's safe in your house.
Okay, so how do you get someone to come in? I guess, how do you even start this process?
Yeah, so you call Mass Save, so there's a 800 number, or also you go to masssave.com, and both of those locations you see the phone number, you call them up, you have a schedule when it works in your schedule, and then that energy specialist comes out to your house, walks through your house, takes a look at it, and so part of it is to assess the structure of the house, and then the other part of the time is they're actually directly putting in light bulbs, putting in LED light bulbs, CFL light bulbs. They can put in programmable thermostats. You may also be eligible for things for like low flow water fixtures to reduce how much water flow you're doing. And when you're doing that, you're reducing how much hot water you're having to produce, which then again is saving you money there. So there's lots of great things that you can do in the house. And then the next step from there is that if you're eligible, they'll recommend a contract for air sealing or for insulation. And then later after that, if you sign that contract, then they'll have the air sealer or insulator come to your house. They'll do that extra work on your house. Air sealing is free, so you can get, depending on the utility company, it can be 12, 15 hours of free air sealing. And then what that does is air sealing helps deal with draftiness. So if you feel that cold air, you feel like you're not keeping the heat that you've sort of already spent money to produce, if it's blowing out your windows, blowing up your roof, if you're losing that heat, it's because you have too much draftiness. So the air sealing is going to seal it down, and all that work is 100% free through this program.
Wow.
And then the insulation is 75% off, up to $2,000. So there again, you can't even go out and buy it yourself and do a sort of DIY project for your insulation to get it as cheap as it is to go through this program. And they're able to then really look at the sort of nooks and crannies, the harder places to get, and really solve those issues and really insulate your house well.
That's a great start. I mean, you have to take advantage of that. And then what about some of these other projects? You know, the Center for EcoTechnology, you can kind of help people get going with some of these other projects. Yeah,
definitely. You can always give us a call. We have got, we've worked with people in the past to do things like interior storm windows. We've educated about other things like you can do, you know, everything from sort of using passive solar where you sort of close the drapes at night and have nice thick drapes and then open them up in the daylight to let that sun in, to let it help warm your house. There's lots of little things that you can do for yourself. yourself. But the Mass Save program is really definitely the best first step. And then the second big step, too, is for people who have the programmable thermostat, is actually programming it. You've even though people who have a programmable thermostat never take the time to program it. They don't do the setback during the day when they're at work. They don't do the setback at night when they're asleep and they're already covered up in their comforters. Those are times where you can decrease the heat in your house and thereby decrease how much money you're spending on heating all that space.
So I've heard a few, different facts about, how much money you can really save with moving your thermostat up and down. Is there any sort of degree range that you should stay in before you're now costing yourself money to go up or down, a significant amount? I've heard a few different, opinions on this. So I'm just curious what you think. Are you supposed to stay within a 5-degree range, or can you go bigger than that? What are your thoughts?
They definitely say that the best thing to do at nighttime is times when you're not in the space or when you're sleeping and covered in your comforter is to drop it by 8 degrees in the wintertime. So if you're keeping it at like a 70 degrees while you're in that space during the living hours, first time in the morning and right in the evening, have it up at 70 degrees, have it at 68 degrees, but then to set it back to 62 or 60 degrees at night, it cools down, you're still comfortable and you're not even in the space at those times. And then it'll kick back on. The great thing about a programmable thermostat is you can program it. If you come home from work at 5:30, you have it turn it back on at 5 o'clock. It kicks back up. Within that half hour, you're back in the space. It's already in that nice warm temperature that you're going to walk back into, and you will have not spent money that whole 8 hours, 9 hours that you're off at work. And that can both reduce our load consumption of the gas, whatever your heating fuel is, and then also saves you money that way.
And a lot of people don't know how much electricity is actually being used when you keep things like your clock plugged in or your coffee pot or things like that. Which items around your house should you unplug? You have a lot of things. It can be a pain to go and plug it all back in too. So where the money matches the convenience, I don't know. What do you recommend for that?
Yeah, what they talk about is called the phantom load. It's sort of those things that are just naturally drawing lots of electricity just to be plugged in. Some of the biggest ones are actually like your big screen TVs or your the game consoles, the Wiis, things like that. Those actually can draw a lot of electricity. And so the best thing to do is if you use a smart strip. What you do is when you turn that TV off, if you've plugged in the other things into that smart strip, the TV gets turned off, all of the other things get turned off, so that you don't have to unplug anything. You don't have to reach behind the TV and unplug your Wii or anything like that. It all just gets shut down when you turn off that TV. Same thing with the computer. There's another place that you can use a smart strip. If you turn off your computer, your speakers, all the other things will get turned off naturally as well. And that will, then you don't have to go around and do all those sort of unplugging and stuff. One of the other big ones in the kitchen is if people use the coffee plates that sort of keep it warm a lot. It's like most oftentimes it's killing the taste of the coffee anyway, so better to not use that and just remake yourself a second pot later when you're ready to drink that cup of coffee. So that's one of the big consumers in the kitchen.
Working for us to save money and have better coffee.
Yes, definitely. You want to have good tasting coffee.
Yeah, exactly. Now, when you do all of these little things, of course, they start to add up. What percentage are you seeing? How much are people really able to save by making some of these changes?
They say in terms of phantom load that you can use over to $100, $150 a year in terms of your electricity use. So if you do these simple things like smart strips, you can save a lot of money. If you use your programmable thermostat and actually program it to decrease, you can save a lot of money there as well. And then again, the biggest one though is really looking at the structure of your house, looking at air sealing and insulation for that house, and that can save you hundreds of dollars. People spend a lot of money, especially if they're heating with oil or other things. It can get very pricey. And the best thing to do, you can get a Mass Save energy assessment. You can do it every year. You don't have to wait for a long time. Some people say, oh, I did that a while back. Do it again. You can get one every year, and the incentives have definitely increased too. The air sealing has gotten better. They'll look at your furnace and they've got some early boiler replacements. They've got a lot of different programs. And then the biggest thing also with the Mass Save program is that any of those costs, whether it's the 25% on insulation or you need to replace your whole furnace or hot water heater, they have the 0% heat loan. So you actually you get 0% on your interest rate, and you can set it up to $25,000 over 7 years. You can be paying that back. So again, you don't have to pay your contractor to suddenly do that whole big furnace and have to kick out a $15,000 cost. you can have that spread out over time and 0% because you're using the heat loan. The only way you're eligible for that heat loan, though, is if you go through the Mass Save program and have the home energy assessment. So that's the first place to a whole lot of great opportunities.
And for people who just want to take a look at this and see if they're eligible for this, really anyone is eligible, right? You can call and ask those questions.
So the one difference there is that everybody's eligible that are above fuel assistance eligible. So if you are fuel assistance eligible or below, then you go through a weatherization program through your community action, your local area. So that's the one difference. But that program is also great for people who are on fuel assistance. They get 100% of things covered. So after they've had that assessment, the insulation is all free, the air sealing is free. Oftentimes they can do even deeper measures as well for your home. And so it's a great program that they should know about, that they're eligible for too. But if you're above that, it's again that everyone is eligible.
Run the gamut. Very good.
Yes.
Marin Goldstein, thank you so much for coming on and talking
Thank
to us.
you.
Some great information. Hopefully it will help some people save some money this winter. I appreciate it. And after the break, we'll talk with a state senator about energy legislation and programs. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. Today we're talking about energy, where it comes from and what it costs. We talked to an energy economist, a representative from National Grid, and a consultant on how to increase energy efficiency in your home. Joining me now, I have State Senator Benjamin Downing joining us, who is the chairman of the Joint Committee of Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Laura.
It's so nice to have you here from Pittsfield. So talk to me. We're trying to understand exactly what plays into the cost of energy. This is something that impacts everyone. We all have to pay for heating our homes this winter. We have the Department of Public Utilities who sort of help set the rates. Help us understand what the state committee actually does, the committee that you're on.
Yeah, sure.
How
Well,
does this play?
in the simplest terms, what drives the cost of our energy are really three things. It's the supply, the type of energy that we're bringing in. Then it is the upkeep of the infrastructure needed to get it to our homes, to our businesses, to customers, so that we can turn the lights on. And then along with those two, it's the maintenance and the upkeep of all that, the simple operation of it, the dealing with storms and what have you. The role of the Joint Committee is to set energy policy for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So to determine where we're going to get those energy sources from, how best to procure it, how to meet our climate change goals while also trying to do everything we can to keep costs down. We try and do that in a way that gives the Department of Public Utilities the flexibility to be able to exercise their expertise. We all know as legislators we have a variety of different issues that we have to keep an eye on, and that we shouldn't be playing politics with the ultimate outcome of policy making. So we try and strike that balance of having both oversight but not meddling with the work of the department. Also, while knowing and recognizing, as some of the panelists before referenced, that energy is not just a Massachusetts issue. It is certainly a regional, a New England issue, and increasingly a national and international issue. So we try and strike that right balance while we seek to achieve those goals. And I think if you look at the story of the last 8 years, really, we have been able to begin a transition to an economy built less around fossil fuels and more around renewables, and in so doing have created a new sector of our economy. But we have a lot more work to do, certainly a lot more work ahead of us with the new transition, with the new administration coming in.
So is the committee actually overseeing the Department of Public Utilities when some of these rate increases are approved? Do you actually have the power to stop that from happening, or you said sort of oversee without meddling? So what exactly does that mean? Are you able to prevent something if you see that it appears to be awfully high for some of the consumers?
Theoretically, the legislature could pass a law that capped electric rates. In fact, that was actually in place in the past. What we found, though, is that we ultimately end up paying those costs in the form of stranded cost for years, and it isn't the most efficient or effective way to set energy policy. So what we have done is try to set up the framework for the DPU to oversee the utilities themselves. Now, in the past, and I wouldn't be surprised if we were to do it again, we will hold oversight hearings to work with the department to better explain why they justified or accepted certain rates. and also to work with them on how we meet our broadly shared goals, how we continue to address the climate change, how we address supply, and how we make sure that Massachusetts businesses are in a competitive environment, and that our constituents, consumers of the electric companies, aren't bearing an undue burden for the ability of turning the lights on every day.
So do they have to offer any explanation as to why they accepted rate increases now? I guess what does the process look like right now?
Yeah, they absolutely do. All the utility companies have to file that paperwork before the Department of Public Utilities. Those are 100% public records. So not any cost can be justified. And we have seen this in the past around storm response, where the utilities have tried to claim certain costs were related to the exorbitant cost of cleaning up from storms, and the department and ultimately the Attorney General's office, as the ratepayer advocate, rejected some of those claims. Certainly we'll be looking at that through the Joint Committee, and the new Attorney General through the Office of the Ratepayer Advocate will be as well. So it is not a stop and start process. It is a constant and ongoing process. One that admittedly is going through a bit of a transition with the changes in administration, different regulators at the DPU, Department of Energy Resources, and certainly in the Secretary and the Governor's office. So it's about making sure that we have a team in place that's overseeing these things, and perhaps more importantly, setting the right policy to be able to meet those broadly shared goals.
Now, how did the closing of the coal and nuclear power plant those plants have on the state? How did those closures impact us as a whole?
The biggest impact that the closure of those facilities had was to increase our reliance on natural gas. While we are ramping up the amount of renewables that we purchase as set by law passed by the legislature, we have not ramped it up quickly enough to be able to make up the difference between the closure of those power plants and the electricity that we need. If you think about all of this, right, it's about how do we use more renewables instead of fossil fuels? How do we use what we use smarter, right? And how do we use less of it? And you heard that from all of your panelists there. Whether it's smart steps you can take through winterization and energy efficiency, whether it's seeking out the utilities programs, and then it's the job of the legislature to make sure that we're doing all of that in accordance with our goals around environmental policy and climate change. So those plants closing has led to a ramp up of natural gas use. Right now, about 60+% of our electricity comes from natural gas. That's put a severe strain on our natural gas infrastructure. One alternative to solving that could be bringing in more supply, but certainly other alternatives are bringing in different supplies, as one of the panelists mentioned. Hydropower from the eastern provinces of Canada certainly has great promise, and my hope would be that that is a big part of the solution to addressing electricity costs, again in line with our climate change goals. Certainly we need to do more to continue to ramp up our investment in renewables, both in basic research but also in the deployment of those renewables. When the Patrick administration came into office, we had 2 megawatts of solar power. We now have policy in place to have 1,600 megawatts of solar power. That's like replacing 2 fossil fuel plants right there. Now, you need to have a different grid to make that all work differently and different technology, but it's all about making sure that transition works across the board.
Okay, and I'm wondering how the changing faces on Beacon Hill are going to impact some of these plans and projects that we have in place or sort of in limbo right now. So I do want to take a short break, and we'll continue and we'll talk about that. So stay with us. We will continue our conversation with State Senator Ben Downing after a short break. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. Today we're talking about energy, where it comes from, what it costs. Before the break, we were discussing the recent electric rate hikes and the cost of energy here in Massachusetts, and we're talking to State Senator Benjamin Downing, who is the chairman of the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy. State Senator from Pittsfield joining us today. Thank you so much again for being here.
Thanks for having me, Laura.
Well, before we took a break, we were talking about some plans for the future and how, you know, we're working to sort of bring our energy usage down, bring the cost down for everyone. I know that there's a lot of projects in the works works. We have talked earlier in the program about the Kinder Morgan pipeline, Keystone. Of course, there's always the Cape Wind project as well. Talk to me about some of these big projects that we have possibly coming here to Massachusetts, where we are with some of these.
Right. There are any number of different projects aimed at addressing the supply and capacity issues, both in Massachusetts and throughout New England. Some of those are natural gas related, as you mentioned, the Kinder Morgan proposal, the Spectrum proposal that Northeast Utilities put out. Certainly there are those transmission projects proposed to bring down both onshore wind and hydroelectric power from the eastern provinces of Canada. You also have the offshore wind proposals, both Cape Wind and now the discussion about lands between Nantucket, Block Island, and Long Island that the federal government is working on. All of those are aimed at building a more reliable and sustainable grid here in Massachusetts, one that we control more of the energy resources from, and that we aren't relying on simply importing in sources from other parts of the country or other countries.
So when do you see some of these projects actually happening, if they happen? Which ones do you think are actually going to come to fruition here in Massachusetts?
Well, my hope would be that in particular we do everything we can to take advantage of the resources in the eastern provinces of Canada. I think that hydropower has the ability to stabilize our energy costs and do so in line with our climate change goals. I have concerns about investing billions of dollars in natural gas pipelines to try and solve a problem that we could have for 5 and 20 years with a solution that we pay for 50 to 100 years. We need to both address the short term but think about the long term as well.
Do you think that we have a natural gas shortage in Massachusetts? Do you have any concerns about that?
I think if we maintain the mix that we have now, then yes. But if we change that mix through hydro and renewables, then we can change the overall formula that gets us to a more stable and reliable electricity mix. But I think in the short term, yes, we do. We need to be smart about that, though. It's got to be a mix of conservation, efficiency, and renewables prioritized, then see what we need to do in the short term on natural gas.
Now, many communities have local utility companies, Holyoke, Chicopee, Westfield. Why don't more communities have that? Is that something that the state would like to see, or what is the deal with that?
Yeah, I think if you talk to communities that would like to have a municipal utility, it is the open-ended nature of trying to form one of those. So if Pittsfield, my hometown, wanted to form a municipal utility, they could send what they thought was a good faith offer to the utility company, and there is no requirement for the utility company to respond to that offer. There have been laws proposed to change that. I favor those changes in the law, but it should also be noted that those municipal utility companies don't participate in many of the programs that have been discussed on this show. So we need to make sure that there's more of a level playing field between municipal utilities and some of the bigger utility companies. And then we learn from the best of what they both do, both that community nature and some of the programs that the large utility companies run.
So do you think that it would be beneficial to the state to have more of these programs and even get them involved with the state, like the Mass Safe program or some of these other programs that we were talking about?
I think it'd be beneficial for communities to have the option, and right now it's not a real option. And I think it would be beneficial for those municipal utilities to participate in these energy efficiency and renewable programs. Some do a great job, not enough of them do.
Okay, so as we get into 2015, what are some of the pieces of legislation having to do with energy and keeping costs down that you think can be addressed? Do you have any concerns about some of the changing faces on Beacon Hill? And I don't know, where are we right now? Do we have a lot in limbo right now?
Yeah, there's a lot up in the air right now. We need to address our net metering caps, one of the biggest incentives for solar power. Again, as I said earlier, we've gone from 2 megawatts towards a plan for 1,600 megawatts, and that's bringing companies here to Massachusetts, including here in Western Mass. In Agawam, Solar City already has 30 employees. They're going to bring another 50 employees. So we need to raise the net metering cap and come up with a long-term solution for that. We'll be addressing legislation around hydropower and other clean energy resources, or at least it will be filed before the committee. I'd like to come up with a proposal on that broadly brings together the stakeholders around business and environmental organizations to use that as a way to try and address some of our costs. but do so in a way that's in line with our climate change goals. And I think that is, broadly speaking, where Governor-elect Baker is at and where his Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs, Matt Beaton, is at. I think there may be some disagreements along the way, but broadly shared, I think we want Massachusetts to be competitive. We want to continue to move forward on our climate change goals, and we want to create and keep as many jobs as those energy dollars here in Massachusetts as we can.
Massachusetts has been recognized for doing very well in this field, and that's kudos to you and everyone, really.
Top 5 in the nation in energy efficiency every year that there have been rankings, first in the nation the last 4 years. 88,000 jobs in clean energy here in Massachusetts today. It's one of our biggest sectors.
That's great. Now, what about making some of our state buildings more energy efficient? Is there any, looking at some of our own buildings rather than just, people and businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. Governor Patrick, working with the legislature, established something called their Lead by Example initiative, where we looked at state office buildings first and foremost to see could we use them for solar. Could we be smart about efficiency and conservation and how we procure energy for these facilities? So absolutely. We have, and we certainly have, a lot more work to do there. There's a lot of work we can do at the community level, and the 100+ green communities that we have, most of which are here in the 4 western counties of Massachusetts, have been leading by example at the more local level, trying to figure out how to use energy smarter in their school buildings, in their city halls, their DPWs, their wastewater treatment plants. There's a lot of great success stories at the local level that we can learn from at the state level, build on, and continue to partner with.
And for people who are watching and maybe haven't gotten involved in this yet, they haven't looked around their house, what sort of incentives and programs would you recommend people at least start to get involved in? How do you want residents to get involved in this and help out?
Yeah, absolutely. The simplest first step you can do is pick up the phone and call your utility company. Whether you have a municipal utility like folks in Holyoke or others, or if you have a larger utility, Western Mass Electric, a National Grid, call them, have them come in, do the assessment, and tell you what's out there. Every home's going to have a different solution, but there are opportunities absolutely everywhere. And if you did it 18 months ago, do it again. If you did it 2 months ago, try again. The more you get people in there, the more opportunities that are there, the more jobs you're going to create locally in your community. I think that is the first step. That's the portal, and then you go from there.
Excellent. Yeah, so many people pay your utility bill without really looking at it. What do you pay for? There are a lot of programs, a lot of ways that you can save money that they're offering that you may not be taking advantage of.
Absolutely. You're paying for it. You ought to be able to get your money's worth out of it.
Senator Ben Denning, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. We look forward to seeing what 2015 brings. Sounds like there's a lot of programs in the works, a lot of projects. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about it.
Thank you, Laura.
Appreciate it. And we will have the last word for you after the break. Stay with us. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Some of us will be paying more for energy in the new year, and that's what our program was all about today. Today we talked to an expert on energy economics. We had a state senator about the legislature's plans for future energy programs. We had a representative from the National Grid and an expert on winterizing your home or business. We certainly hope that you take away information that will be useful to you and save you some money. That is our program for today. We want to thank all of our guests for joining us. Thanks to you at home for watching. If you've missed any of it, you can watch it in full on our website at wwlp.com. From all of us here at 22 News, we wish you a wonderful Sunday. Take care.